I want to start today with a mental image.
Mm,
I want you to picture um, a power drill. It's sitting on a workbench.
okay.
It's a serious piece of kit-heavy battery, diamond-tipped bit, high torque. But here's the thing. It's just sitting there. It doesn't
Yeah.
do anything until I pick it up, aim it at some drywall, and pull the trigger.
Right.
If I drill a hole in a water pipe behind that wall, that is 100% on me. I'm the carpenter. The drill is just the tool.
That is a very comforting image. It's clean. It places you right in the center of the universe as the master of your domain.
Exactly. And for the longest time, that is exactly how I've been told to think about artificial intelligence. You know, whether it's a chatbot, a complex data platform, whatever, the narrative is always, it's a tool,
A really, really fancy power drill.
a very fancy power drill. It helps me get the job done faster, but I am still the one in the driver's seat. But, and here's where the sources for today's deep dive, well, they absolutely blew my mind, that tool mindset might actually be a trap.
Oh, it's not just a trap. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of what we are interacting with. The research we are looking at today, specifically from this course, AI as a System, the erosion of human judgment, argues that when we treat AI like a passive tool, we blind ourselves to what is actually happening.
So we aren't picking up a hammer.
No, we're stepping into a system.
That distinction, tool versus system, that's the whole ballgame today. It sounds like semantics, but as we dug into these materials, it became so clear that this mindset shift changes everything. It changes who is responsible when things break.
Oh, yeah.
It changes how we make decisions, and this is the scary part. It changes how we learn, or rather how we stop learning.
Right, because when you use a tool, you're optimizing for a task. But when you enter a system, the system begins to shape you. It alters your behavior, your attention, and your judgment in ways you might not even notice until it's, too late.
So our mission today is to drag these invisible dynamics out into the light. We're going to move from that tool mindset to a system mindset. We're going to unpack how AI creates something called false authority, how it creates this web of confusion around who is actually to blame for bad outcomes, and the big one, how judgment isn't disappearing, it's just moving. It's moving into the past.
It's moving to places where we can no longer see it, and that is what makes this so critical for anyone working with these technologies today.
Okay, so let's start with this tool mindset trap. The source material defines it pretty clearly. It's viewing AI as a neutral assistant. It enhances productivity, but humans stay the primary decision makers. Now, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Please do.
That sounds great. That sounds like exactly what I want from my software. Why is the course arguing this is a problem?
It sounds great because it reinforces the status quo. It tells us we're safe, but the source material highlights a phenomenon that kicks in immediately, and it's called the diffusion of responsibility. See, in the tool mindset, we assume that if something goes wrong,
The human is on the hook, clearly.
a human user is clearly responsible.
Yeah.
But in practice, when teams start relying on AI recommendations, that line of responsibility just dissolves.
Can you give me a concrete example of what that looks like? Because, I mean, usually if I screw up at work, I know it's my fault.
Okay, yeah. Imagine a scenario in a corporate setting. Let's say a bank. You have a loan officer using an AI system to evaluate applications.
Right.
The AI spits out a recommendation: deny loan. Now, if the officer denies it and it turns out that applicant would have been a perfect customer, the officer can kind of shrug and say, hey, I was following the data-driven insight. The sophisticated model said no.
Right. Don't look at me. Look at the algorithm.
Exactly. But flip it, if the officer decides to use their human judgment and overrides the AI to approve the loan, and then the borrower defaults, now the manager is asking,
Why did you ignore the system?
why did you ignore the system? We spent millions on this tool, and you thought you knew better.
Oof. So you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
Precisely. The path of least resistance, the safest path for your career, is to just do what the machine says.
Yeah.
And when things go wrong, the accountability becomes fragmented. The user blames the tool's output. The developers blame the user for misinterpreting the tool or using it in the wrong context. It just becomes this complex web where no one really owns the outcome.
That is what the sources call the diffusion of accountability. It's like a fog. You reach out to grab the person responsible and your hand just goes through smoke.
And it gets more specific than just blame. The course points out a fundamental change in workflows. specifically around escalation.
This was a really interesting point.
Sure.
Because traditionally, escalation is a human instinct, right? A gut feeling.
Right. In a traditional workflow, you're working on a problem, you hit a snag or something feels off, your intuition kicks in, and you decide to escalate it to a manager or a specialist. You say, this requires a second pair of eyes.
I use my gut. I say, this pattern looks weird, and I ring the alarm bell.
But with AI systems, escalation is often built into the logic. The machine flags what's an outlier and what isn't. It decides what requires human intervention.
So human intuition gets sidelined.
It's effectively sidelined. You aren't escalating because you sense a problem. You're only escalating when the code tells you to.
So we're outsourcing the uh-oh feeling to a machine. If the dashboard is green, I just assume everything is fine, even if the building is burning down behind me.
That is the danger. We stop scanning the horizon for smoke because the sensor says there's no fire, and that leads us directly to the illusion of certainty.
This was the biggest aha moment for me in the reading. We really have to talk about what AI actually outputs. We treat it like an answer, right? Like a calculator giving us 2 + 2 = 4.
But it is absolutely not an answer. The sources are very, very emphatic on this. AI outputs are probabilistic predictions.
Okay, let's unpack that because I think most people hear prediction and they think fortune teller. But this is math.
Well, think of a weather forecast. If the app says there's a 70% chance of rain, that isn't a fact. It's an estimate based on historical patterns.
Right.
It means in 7 out of 10 similar historical situations, it rained. It also means in 3 out of 10, it didn't.
Right. But when I'm using AI for work, say, this candidate is a 90% match for the job, or this marketing strategy has an 80% success probability, my brain doesn't see the 20% failure rate.
No, we round up. Our brains are wired for efficiency, not nuance. We
Yeah.
see 90% and we think, this is the answer. The text calls this prediction authority.
Prediction authority.
Yeah. As the statistical authority of the prediction increases, as that percentage gets higher, the visibility of your own individual human judgment diminishes. We stop treating it as a probability and start treating it as a directive.
And that leads to what they call the erosion of inquiry. That phrase really stuck with me. It sounds like the title of a sad novel.
It is a profound concept. When predictions are treated as answers, we stop asking questions. Workflows become linear. You get the output, you execute. You don't pause to explore.
Well, let's be honest. It's also social pressure. If I'm in a meeting and the algorithm, which has crunched 10 terabytes of data, says do option A, and I raise my hand and say, I don't know, guys, I kind of feel like we should do option B.
You look like a lunatic.
I look like a lunatic. I look like I'm arguing with math.
You are fighting against epistemic authority.
Epistemic authority. Okay, break that down for me.
It's basically, who do we trust to know the truth? The sources break this down beautifully. First, there's the objectivity illusion. We know algorithms process these vast amounts of data more than any human could read in 1,000 lifetimes. So we assume they're neutral and empirically true.
Even though we know intellectually that the data just captures the world as it was, not necessarily as it should be.
Right, but emotionally, the presentation tricks us. The sources talk about the suit and tie effect of software. It looks professional. It uses formal, polished language. It gives us statistical confidence intervals, those specific percentages we just talked about.
And that triggers a response.
It triggers a psychological response that feels like certainty.
It's hard to argue with a spreadsheet that is formatted perfectly.
Exactly. And this creates a social dynamic where authority figures, or, systems, discourage questioning. A culture of conformity emerges. If the AI is the expert, challenging it feels risky. And here's the kicker. If the AI is wrong, we often lack the context to even know it.
Because we didn't do the work to get there. We just took the helicopter to the top of the mountain.
Right. Misinformation cycles start to happen. If the AI is wrong, the user often lacks the background to realize it, leading to uncritical acceptance.
And that leads to automation bias. It just becomes the new normal.
It does, and part of it is simple biology. Humans are what psychologists call cognitive misers. Thinking is hard work, it burns glucose. Evolutionarily, we want to save energy.
And relying on AI is just easier.
It reduces that cognitive load. We stop verifying results because it's easier not to.
And the sources mentioned desensitization, too. Even if we see errors every now and then, if it works most of the time, we just accept the risk. It's like, it's usually right, and we click approve.
Which brings us to perhaps the most insidious part of the system mindset, the conflict between optimization and learning.
This was the part that actually made me worry about my own brain.
Yeah.
We usually think optimization is good. We want to be efficient. We want to hit our targets. Who doesn't want to be faster?
And optimization is great for metrics. It focuses on targets, speed, efficiency. But the sources argue that optimization often crowds out learning.
How so?
Well, think about how you actually learn something deeply. It usually involves taking the long way around. You try, you fail, you hit a dead end, you realize why it was a dead end. Learning requires friction. It requires wandering.
But optimization is all about removing friction.
Exactly. Optimization demands you stay on the fastest path. When we focus entirely on hitting the number, the target provided by the system, we stop exploring anomalies or alternative solutions.
It reminds me of the GPS effect. I've lived in this city for 10 years. But because I use navigation apps for every single trip to dodge traffic, if my phone dies, I honestly don't know if I could get across town.
That's it.
I never learned the city, I just learned to follow the blue line.
That is the perfect analogy. And the course calls this a quiet suppression of learning. It's invisible. You don't notice it immediately. It's a slow erosion.
Right.
You hit your targets this quarter and next quarter. You look like a rock star, but you've stopped understanding why you're hitting them. You've stopped understanding the foundational mechanics of your business or your field.
And the danger there is delayed feedback. You don't realize you've become dependent until the environment changes.
Yes. Suddenly, the road closes, to use your analogy, or a new competitor appears, or the market crashes.
Yeah.
The algorithm's historical patterns don't apply anymore. You need to improvise.
And you can't.
But you can't because you never built that mental map. You just learned to push the button.
We've optimized ourselves into a corner.
It creates a tunnel vision effect. Optimization consumes all our cognitive resources. There is no room left for reflection or curiosity. The questions narrow in scope. We stop asking, why are we doing this? And only ask, how do we do this faster?
Speaking of faster, let's talk about speed. The sources have a really interesting take on speed. Usually we think speed is just velocity. But here they describe speed as a diagnostic.
Yes, this is a crucial insight. Speed exposes broken incentives and system truths. When you're forced to decide fast, you don't have time for nuance. You rely on heuristics on shortcuts.
So when the pressure is on, the polite mask comes off.
Correct. Speed reveals your true underlying biases and the actual culture of your organization. If your organization says it values thoughtfulness and quality, but implements a system that demands you process 50 decisions an hour, the speed reveals the truth. You value volume.
It strips away the polite fiction of the organization.
Yeah, and it leads us to the biggest paradox in the source material. We think we're using AI to remove human judgment, to make things objective, mathematical, fair. We want to take the messy human out of the loop.
Right. That's the sales pitch. Remove the bias. Make it data-driven.
But the sources scream this point. Judgment cannot be removed.
Wait, hold on. If the machine is doing the thinking, isn't judgment removed?
No, it just moves. This is the aha moment. Judgment moves from the present moment, you making a decision right now, to the past.
Where, specifically, where does it go?
To the data curation phase and the system design. I mean, think about it. Who chose the training data? Who decided which variables mattered? For example, that credit history matters more than current cash flow. Who tuned the parameters of the algorithm?
Humans, developers, data scientists.
Exactly. So we are not being governed by objective math. We're being governed by judgments made in the past by developers and data curators, rather than active judgment in the present moment.
That is actually kind of heavy. We are trading our active present tense judgment for the fossilized judgment of someone else from 2 years ago who we've never even met.
Fossilized judgment. That is a great way to put it. And often, that someone else didn't even know they were making a judgment. They thought they were just cleaning data.
Wow.
But deciding what data to keep and what to throw away is the ultimate judgment call.
This creates a really tense situation for the person actually sitting at the desk, doesn't it? The sources talk about responsibility without authority.
This is the final tension. We end up in a situation where humans feel the responsibility, they fear the bad outcomes, they know they'll get blamed if the client is unhappy, but they lack the authority to override the system because the system is viewed as the superior expert.
It sounds like a recipe for burnout.
It causes massive cognitive dissonance. If you override the AI and you're wrong, you're fired. If you follow the AI and it's wrong, well, it's a system error, but you still feel the stress of the failure. This eventually leads to disengagement. People just check out.
They become button pushers.
They do. They stop trying to understand. They just want to survive the shift.
So what does this all mean for us? We've gone from thinking of AI as a simple hammer to realizing it's this complex ecosystem that shifts responsibility, creates false certainty, and might be atrophying our brains. It sounds bleak.
It's only bleak if we stay passive, if we stay in the tool mindset. The source material isn't saying don't use AI, it's saying wake up to the system.
So how do we wake up?
It means we have to stop being passive users.
Sure.
When you see a prediction, you have to actively remind yourself this is a probability, not a fact. You have to re-inject the friction that the system is trying to remove.
So when I see that 90% match, I need to force myself to look at the 10%, to ask about that 10%.
Yes, and when you feel the urge to just accept the output to save time, you have to recognize that feeling. Label it. That is automation bias. That is my brain saving calories. Just naming it helps you fight it.
And regarding the learning aspect,
Yeah.
how do I make sure I don't lose the ability to navigate the city, so to speak?
We have to protect the why. If you're a leader, you have to make sure your team understands the mechanics, not just the interface. Sometimes you have to force them to do it the hard way without the tool, just to ensure the foundational knowledge is still there.
Like learning to drive a manual transmission before you get into a self-driving car.
Exactly. You need to know how the gears work. The tool mindset makes us passive. The system mindset gives us a chance to reclaim our agency. We have to see the invisible judgments embedded in the code so we can apply our own judgment on top of it.
It really changes how I look at every piece of software I use now. It's not just doing a job, it's shaping how I think.
And that's the power of this deep dive. Once you see the system, you can't unsee it.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought from the source material, something that's been bouncing around in my head. We talked about how judgment moved to data curation. That means data curation is the new seat of judgment.
It is the new boardroom.
So, if judgment hasn't disappeared, but has just become invisible, hidden inside the training data, are we comfortable with who made those invisible judgments? The sources suggest that what looks like a lack of control is actually just a redistribution of influence. And seeing where that influence went, back to the data, back to the design, that is the first step to getting control back.
It's not about rejecting the technology, it's about knowing who is really driving.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep asking questions, and don't let the algorithm do all the thinking for you.
Until next time.